I never imagined cementing unauthorized wells would expose a corrupt veterans association and transform my battlefield inheritance into a sanctuary. How would you react when you discover your land is being secretly exploited by the very people claiming to honor those who served? The morning started like any other since I'd returned from my final tour. The spring sun was just breaking through the pines surrounding my cabin as I poured my first cup of coffee. My service dog, Ranger, suddenly perked up his ears, head tilted, toward the eastern edge of my property. I heard it seconds later, the unmistakable grind of heavy machinery. I grabbed my cane and made my way to the porch, squinting toward the sound. Through the trees, I spotted a large drilling rig and 3 workers in bright yellow vests trudging across my land. My grandfather's land that had been in our family since he returned from Korea in '53. "Hey!" I shouted, limping down the steps and across the field faster than my damaged knee appreciated. "What the hell do you think you're doing on my property?" The workers looked up, barely acknowledging me as I approached. The tallest one, a weathered man with a thick grey mustache, finally stepped forward. "Morning," he said casually. "Just setting up for the community water access project." "Community what?" I demanded. "This is private property, my property." He sighed like I was inconveniencing him and reached into his truck, pulling out a folder of paperwork. "Got all the necessary permits right here, buddy. Signed off by the Mountain Ridge Veterans Community Association." I snatched the papers from his hand. Sure enough, there was an official-looking document with the MRVCA logo stamped across the top. According to these papers, they had authorization to drill 3 wells along the eastern boundary of my 20 acres to ensure adequate water access for community veterans during emergency shortages. "This has to be some kind of mistake," I said, scanning the paperwork. "I never agreed to this. I don't even belong to the association." The worker shrugged. "Not my department, sir. We go where the paperwork sends us." He tapped the signature line at the bottom. "Someone signed off on it." I studied the signature more carefully. "This isn't my signature," I said, feeling heat rise in my chest. "This is forgery." "Look, we're just doing our job," the second worker called over. "Take it up with Colonel Bennett at the association office." Bennett. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Colonel James Bennett ran the Veterans Association that served the planned community adjacent to my property. He'd been trying to convince me to donate a portion of my land for their veterans retreat. Ever since I inherited it last year, said it was my duty to help fellow vets. I declined repeatedly. "Stop working right now," I ordered. "I'm calling." "The sheriff!" The foreman sighed again. "Fine, we'll take a break while you sort this out, but the colonel said this was all approved through proper channels." As I hobbled back toward my cabin, my phone vibrated with a text message. "Hope you're enjoying your morning, Captain Reynolds. I see the drilling team arrived. Let's discuss your contribution to our veteran community. My office, 2 p.m. Colin Bennett." I stared at the message in disbelief. The arrogance, the entitlement. I took a photo of the drilling equipment on my land before calling Sheriff Morgan, an old high school friend who'd stayed local while I went off to war. "They've got paperwork, Mitch," I explained when he answered. "But the signature isn't mine. Bennett is behind this." "Bennett's got a lot of influence around here, Jake," the sheriff warned. "Holds fundraisers for the county commissioners. Donates to the police benevolent fund. Are you sure you want to pick this fight?" "They're trespassing on my land with forged documents," I replied. This isn't a fight I picked, but I'll damn well finish it. I hung up and stared across my grandfather's land, the land where I'd found peace after 3 brutal tours in Afghanistan, the land where I was finally sleeping through the night again. Now Bennett and his association thought they could just take what they wanted because they wore the same uniform I did. Not on my watch. Sheriff Morgan arrived 40 minutes later, his patrol car kicking up dust as it rolled down my gravel driveway. The workers had resumed drilling despite my objections, the loud mechanical grinding setting my nerves on edge. Ranger paced anxiously at my side, sensing my agitation. "Quite an operation they've got going," Morgan remarked, surveying the scene. He approached the foreman, who promptly produced the same paperwork I'd already seen. "Everything's in order." "Sheriff," the man insisted. "Signed and approved by the Veterans Association and County Water Board." Morgan examined the documents carefully. "This signature doesn't match Captain Reynolds on file," he noted, "and I don't see any county approval stamps here." The foreman's confidence wavered. "Colonel Bennett assured us everything was legitimate. We're just contracted to do the job. I need you to suspend operations until we sort this out," Morgan ordered. "Pack up and come back when you have proper authorization." The workers grumbled, but began shutting down their equipment. As they departed, Morgan turned to me with a troubled expression. "Jake, this is strange. The County Water Board hasn't approved any new wells in this area. We've had some dry weather, but nothing approaching emergency conditions." "Bennett's been after my land since I inherited it," I explained. "Claims the Veterans Association needs it for some retreat center. Keeps saying, 'It's my duty to other veterans.'" Morgan nodded slowly. "The association has been expanding rapidly. They've acquired several properties around here in the past year." He handed me his card. "Document everything. I'll look into the county permits, but tread carefully. Bennett has powerful friends." After Morgan left, I drove into town to the Mountain Ridge Veterans Community Association headquarters. The modern building stood in stark contrast to the modest homes surrounding it, with its reflective glass facade and manicured landscaping. A large sign announced, "Serving those who served. New recreation center coming soon." Colonel James Bennett kept me waiting for 40 minutes before his secretary ushered me into his office. He sat behind an imposing desk, campaign medals displayed prominently on the wall behind him. "Captain Reynolds," he greeted me without standing, gesturing to a chair. "I was expecting you earlier." "I was busy dealing with trespassers on my property," I replied, remaining on my feet. "Care to explain why you forged my signature on well permits?" Bennett's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Strong accusation, Captain. We have an easement agreement signed by your grandfather when he joined the association years ago. During water emergencies, we're permitted to access the aquifer under your property." "My grandfather never joined your association," I challenged. "He wouldn't have signed away rights to his land." Bennett slid a folder across his desk. "Records indicate otherwise. Gerald Reynolds, founding member, 2010. I flipped through the document skeptically. The Mountain Ridge Veterans Association wasn't even established until 2015. My grandfather died in 2013. A flicker of annoyance crossed Bennett's face before his practiced smile returned. "The predecessor organization, then. The paperwork transferred when we incorporated formally." Something felt very wrong. I took photos of the documents with my phone, while Bennett watched with thinly veiled irritation. "The wells are necessary," he continued. "Our community faces water shortages during peak usage." I saw sprinklers running throughout your complex on my way here, I pointed out. Doesn't look like much of a shortage. Bennett's expression hardened. The wells are primarily for our new facilities. The retreat center will serve dozens of veterans recovering from combat trauma. Surely you, of all people, appreciate that mission. I support helping veterans, I replied. I don't support theft and forgery. We're done here, Bennett said, standing abruptly. The wells will proceed as planned. If you continue interfering, the association will take legal action. On my way out, I noticed a scale model of the Veterans Healing Center displayed in the lobby. It showed extensive water features, a decorative lake, fountains, even a small waterfall. No wonder they needed access to the aquifer beneath my land. I stopped at the county records office before heading home. The clerk, an elderly woman named Marie, had known my grandfather. Let me check the property records, she offered when I explained my situation. After several minutes of searching, she looked up in confusion. There's no easement registered on your grandfather's property, Jake, and he definitely wasn't a member of any veterans association. Can you check when the Mountain Ridge Veterans Association first filed organizational papers? I asked. Marie tapped at her keyboard. They incorporated in 2015, but she paused, reading carefully. Interesting. They purchased their current property from Clearwater Development Group in 2016. Who's Clearwater Development? I asked. Real estate developers from the city, Marie replied. They've been buying up land around here for years. Colonel Bennett was their local consultant before he started the Veterans Association. Pieces were starting to connect. I thanked Marie and drove home, my mind racing. Instead of heading to my cabin, I walked my property line, examining the drilling sites. 3 wells had been started, spaced equally along the eastern border. But something caught my attention. The wells weren't positioned to maximize water collection. They formed a straight line directly toward the newly announced Healing Center site. I pulled out my phone and searched for Clearwater Development Group. Their website proudly displayed upcoming projects, including luxury condos surrounding a man-made lake, located precisely where the Veterans Healing Center was supposed to be built. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of machinery again, louder this time. I grabbed my cane and hurried outside to find not 1, but 3 drilling rigs operating on my property. A security guard in a Veterans Association uniform stood watching from the edge of the road. When he spotted me approaching, he stepped forward. Morning, Captain. I'm instructed to inform you that this is legal association business. Any interference will result in a restraining order. I ignored him and approached the nearest crew. The foreman from yesterday was supervising as they lowered pipes into a hole that already looked significantly deeper. I thought the sheriff told you to stop until proper authorization was confirmed, I said. The man avoided eye contact. Got new paperwork this morning, direct from Colonel Bennett and the county commissioner's office. Let me see it, I demanded. He handed me a document bearing the county seal and Commissioner Wilson's signature, authorizing emergency water access for Veterans Therapeutic Services. The paper looked official, but something about the signature seemed off. I photographed it with my phone. How many wells are you planning to drill? I asked, counting at least 5 marked locations. 7 total, he answered. 3 primary, 4 secondary. Should be finished by end of week. 7 wells. This wasn't about emergency water access. This was systematic exploitation. I called Sheriff Morgan immediately but got his voicemail. Next, I tried the County Water Authority. Patricia slid a flash drive across the table. Bennett isn't even a real colonel. He served 4 years as a supply officer, never saw combat. His entire persona is manufactured to gain veterans' trust. And the association? A front, she confirmed. The real money comes from property development. They use the association to acquire land cheaply, gain tax exemptions, and access government grants. Then they secretly transfer the most valuable parcels to Clearwater Development, where Bennett is a silent partner, I guessed. Patricia nodded. The association retains just enough land to maintain appearances. The wells on your property? The water's not for veterans. It's for the luxury development. Water rights in this region are worth millions. Why are you telling me this? I asked. My husband was a real colonel, she said, eyes glistening. He died in Afghanistan. What Bennett's doing dishonors every veteran. I've gone to the authorities, but Bennett has too many officials in his pocket. I thanked her for the information and promised to be careful. When I returned home, I found a violation notice on my door. The Veterans Association was filing a nuisance complaint against my property for unmaintained grounds creating community hazards. This wasn't just about water anymore. Bennett was coming after my entire property. I reviewed Patricia's files that night, connecting more dots in Bennett's scheme. His operation was sophisticated, a masterclass in exploiting both veteran goodwill and bureaucratic loopholes. The flash drive contained bank statements showing millions diverted from association accounts to Clearwater Development, along with email exchanges discussing acquisition strategies for my property specifically. By morning, workers had completed 3 wells and started on a 4th. They were laying pipes that ran straight through my property toward the development site. One crew had cut down a line of oak trees my grandfather had planted, claiming they interfered with necessary access. I called my old platoon buddy Marcus, now an environmental lawyer in the city. "They're moving too fast, Jake," Marcus said after I explained the situation. "This level of urgency means they're worried about something. We can file for an emergency injunction, but the courts move slowly. It might take weeks." "I don't have weeks," I replied, watching another drilling rig arrive. "They'll have stripped my entire property by then." "Document everything," Marcus advised, "and whatever you do, don't give them any reason to claim you're interfering with their work. They'd love to get a restraining order against you." I spent the day photographing every inch of destruction, the half-finished wells, the cleared trees, the trenches for water lines cutting across my grandfather's old vegetable garden. The workers ignored me completely, as if I were invisible on my own land. That evening, a black SUV pulled up to my cabin. Colonel Bennett himself stepped out, accompanied by 2 men in association security uniforms. "Captain Reynolds," Bennett, who called out, his voice artificially cheerful. "Thought we should chat neighbor to neighbor." I stepped onto my porch, Ranger at my side. Nothing neighborly about forged documents and illegal wells. Bennett's smile tightened. "Let's be reasonable. The association is willing to compensate you for the inconvenience. $10,000 for the water access easement." "The easement you forged, you mean?" "Administrative oversight," Bennett waved dismissively. "Easily corrected with your signature now." "My grandfather paid $7,000 an acre for this land in the 1950s, I said. "Today, with water rights, it's worth 50 times that. You're not after an easement. You're after the entire aquifer." Bennett's facade cracked slightly. "You're being difficult for no reason. This water will help fellow veterans." "It'll help your luxury condo development," I countered. "The one you're building where your healing center was supposed to go." Real anger flashed in Bennett's eyes. "We have permits. We have authorization. This project will proceed with or without your cooperation." My lawyer disagrees. Bennett stepped closer. "Listen carefully, Reynolds. I've invested too much to let one stubborn veteran with PTSD delusions stand in my way. The association has resources you can't imagine." "Is that a threat, fake colonel?" His eyes widened momentarily before narrowing. "You should be careful about making accusations. Stress can make veterans like you unstable. Would be a shame if authorities had to intervene for a wellness check." After Bennett left, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset illuminate the drilling equipment scattered across my land. 4 wells completed now, with 3 more marked for excavation. By this time tomorrow, they'd have control of every water access. Point beneath my property, I remembered my grandfather's words when he showed me the land. "Water's the real wealth here, Jake. More valuable than gold in the long run." An idea began to form. Bennett had permits to drill wells, but the documents said nothing about what happened to those wells afterward. There was no guarantee of ongoing access or maintenance rights. I called another buddy from my unit, Eric, who now worked construction. "How odd would it be to get a cement mixer out here tomorrow?" I asked. "Cement mixer?" Eric sounded confused. "Planning some kind of project?" "Emergency foundation repair," I replied. "How much concrete would it take to fill a vertical shaft about 10 inches wide and 60 feet deep?" Eric whistled. "That's oddly specific. You'd need several cubic yards at least. What exactly are you planning, Captain?" "Just exploring my options," I said. Before dawn, I drove to 3 different hardware stores in neighboring counties, buying quick-setting concrete mix at each. I didn't want a large single-purchase drawing attention. Eric arrived with a small cement mixer at first light. "I don't know what you're up to," he said, eyeing the drilling equipment, "but I brought some steel rebar scraps too. Once set with those embedded, not even a diamond drill could get through easily." We waited until midday, when the crews broke for lunch. The security guard dozed in his truck, overcome by the warm spring sun. Working quickly, we wheeled the mixer to the first, completed well. I mixed the concrete to a thick consistency, adding broken metal pieces as Eric suggested. The grey slurry disappeared into the darkness of the shaft, filling it completely. We smoothed the top and moved to the next one. By late afternoon, we had cemented 3 wells solid. Eric helped me hide the mixer in my shed, just as the workers returned to continue drilling on the remaining sites. "They're gonna notice eventually," Eric warned. "I'm counting on it," I replied. The next morning I woke to furious pounding on my door. Bennett stood there, flanked by the county commissioner and a police officer I didn't recognize. "What did you do?" Bennett demanded, his face flushed with rage. "No formal water emergency has been declared," the clerk confirmed. "We're at standard conservation levels for spring. Just the usual restrictions on lawn watering during peak hours. Can you check if Commissioner Wilson approved an emergency well project on my property?" There was a pause and keyboard clicking. "I don't see any such authorization in our system. Water access permits require review by our department before commissioner approval." This confirmed my suspicions. I drove straight to the county commissioner's office, where Wilson's secretary reluctantly agreed to let me see him after I mentioned possible document forgery using his signature. Commissioner Wilson, a portly man with a perpetual sheen of sweat, seemed nervous as I placed the permit on his desk. "This signature," I said. "Is it yours?" He examined it, frowning. It resembles my signature, but I don't recall approving this specific permit. He shifted uncomfortably. Colonel Bennett did request some expedited authorizations for veteran services. I may have signed several at once during our fundraiser last week. So you signed blank permits for Bennett? I pressed. Wilson wiped his brow. I wouldn't characterize it that way. The Colonel has been a tremendous asset to our community. His Veterans Association brings in significant revenue and donations to your re-election campaign. I asked. Wilson's face hardened. I think we're done here, Captain Reynolds. If you have concerns about the permits, take them up with Colonel Bennett. I've documented everything, I warned. If these are fraudulent, there will be consequences. Careful. With threats, Captain, Wilson replied. The Veterans Association provides jobs and tax revenue. Most folks around here appreciate what they're doing. I left feeling frustrated, but more determined than ever. On a hunch, I drove to the association's announced healing center site. Construction equipment was already clearing land, but instead of medical facilities, workers were installing what looked like utility connections for residential units. I approached a surveyor marking boundaries. Excuse me? What's being built here? I thought this was the Veterans Healing Center. The man consulted his plans. This section is for the lakeside villas at Mountain Ridge, luxury vacation homes. The Veterans Facility is that smaller section over there. He pointed to a modest corner of the property, a fraction of the overall development. I took photos of the plans when he wasn't looking. The lake featured prominently in the center of the development, fed by a water line that ran directly from my property. Back home, I found 2 of the wells nearly completed, with workers starting on the 3rd. The drilling continued late into the evening under floodlights. That night, an email arrived from an anonymous address. Bennett isn't who he claims to be. Meet me at Carter's Diner tomorrow, 2 p.m., back booth. I arrived early at the diner, choosing a seat with a clear view of the entrance. At precisely 2 p.m., a woman in her 60s entered, scanning the room before approaching my table. Captain Reynolds, I'm Patricia Dawson, she said quietly. I was the association's bookkeeper until 3 months ago. Until what happened? I asked. I started asking questions about financial irregularities, she explained, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Large transfers to offshore accounts, misappropriation of donation funds, falsified grant applications. I stepped onto the porch calmly. Did something happen? You know damn well what happened, Bennett hissed. 3 wells have been sabotaged, filled with concrete. That's unfortunate, I replied, but I don't see how it concerns me. Don't play dumb, Commissioner Wilson interjected. This is destruction of property. Officer, arrest him. I stood my ground. Before you do anything hasty, you should know I've been documenting everything. The forged permits, the fake water emergency, the luxury development disguised as a veterans facility. The officer hesitated, looking between us. What's he talking about, Commissioner? I pulled out my phone, showing them Patricia's evidence. The association has been selling water rights from my property to developers. Their veterans' retreat is actually a luxury condo project. Commissioner Wilson's face paled. The officer took a step back, suddenly uncertain. This is absurd, Bennett sputtered, but his confidence was visibly shaken. Sheriff Morgan is meeting with the State Attorney General right now, I continued. Patricia Dawson's financial records show where every dollar went. The concrete just bought us enough time to expose everything. Within weeks, Bennett's empire crumbled spectacularly. The investigation revealed 11 county officials involved in the scheme. The Veterans Association was placed under state oversight, with genuine veterans appointed to the board. Ironically, those cemented wells became something of a monument. When the new association leadership apologized and asked what I wanted to do with my property, I surprised everyone, including myself. My grandfather always said this land should serve a purpose, I told them. We established a legitimate veterans retreat on 5 acres of my property. The cemented well caps became part of a memorial garden where veterans could find the peace I'd sought when I returned home. 1 year later, I stood beside one of those cement-filled wells, now surrounded by healing gardens tended by veterans, finding their way back from war. A plaque read, "Sometimes healing begins when we stand firm against those who would take advantage of others." As for the water beneath my land, it now supplies both my home and the retreat center, one well legally permitted, drilled with my full consent. Sometimes in life you have to cement your boundaries to find your foundation. Have you ever had to take a stand to protect what's yours? Share your story in the comments below. If you enjoyed this tale of standing up against corruption, hit that subscribe button for more stories about everyday heroes who refuse to back down when faced with injustice. Remember, one person with the courage to act can make all the difference.